What's up, everyone? Happy Friday. Welcome to the game on Pax8 Live, the show where we talk about all the cybersecurity shenanigans you need to be aware of for the last week. We have some good content for you this week. We're going to be talking a little bit more about the MDR debate. But first,
Dom, were you
what's
using
up,
an
Matt?
XDR product just then?
I was using an XDR product just then. Caused a little bit of
Makes
lag.
sense. That makes
But
sense.
I do
No,
have
we're
to
on the same
hijack the
page
first
now.
news article, which is make sure you
Okay.
sign up for Beyond. I'm so bad at this. I only remember after I break for the news. Don't forget to sign up for Beyond. And the new details of the
Yeah.
security track are slowly easing onto the agenda on pax8beyond.com. You won't want to miss it.
I will also offer something. If you are a security nerd, a hyper well-known security player in our space, and you want to come to Beyond and help out and be part of it, please reach out to me. I might have a code for you. So I'd love to have you at Beyond with us. Perhaps. Great call out. Okay, let's get started with the news, Dom. What is this weekend? What do we have coming up next week? Today's the 14th. So
Everyone's favorite day
tax
of the damn
day.
year, dude.
I actually am very excited about this tax day. You know why, Dom? This is the
Why is
first
that?
time my CPA has called me and said, "Hey, Matt, you're overpaid on both state and federal taxes."
What?
Yes.
Man.
No check
Gonna
out
get
of
a
my account
credit
this week.
instead
It's
of a
great.
debit? That would be nice.
Well, I'm probably going to let them hold on to her, even though it's stupid. But yeah, credit instead of a debit isn't often. So it is tax day, and I just want you all to be aware that the threat actors understand this, right? Why is it that we had the Kaseya event over July 4th? Why is it that we had the, right? And so people understand and take advantage of either times we're not protecting or situational things. As COVID came about, how many malwares did you hear about, Dom, around COVID and was being delivered by COVID, right? You're seeing, or people saying, "Hey, here's a COVID email and you need to check here," and then it's malware or a phishing email or something. Same situation. Microsoft makes a warning about this today and says, "Hey, listen, threat actors strive to cause tax day headaches. We've already seen phishing campaigns, Remcoast remote access Trojan, right? All kinds of stuff going on. So just be careful, pay attention." And I was talking to Eric Bowles today, and one of the things he's advocating people is go make content. Go as an MSP and make content. This is one of those situations where just picking up your phone and saying, "Hey, tax day Monday for all my followers and clients and partners. Just want to let you know, be ever vigilant. You're going to get tons of phishing. You guys need to be careful. It's probably not from the IRS. And if you have any questions, please hit up our support team. Love to help you out. Thanks so much." Right? Like, this is kind of one of those things where I feel like it is our opportunity to take and spread the message to help protect others. So won't beat this one to death too much.
CPA customers, for the love of God, please make sure that they do not post pictures of their clients' tax returns on LinkedIn. I'm up to 6 or 7 this year, and I get a bunch every year.
It's crazy.
The sweet new desk set up for the year, or the picture of the team working hard, and just or Sally's tax returns right there on the screen or on the desk. So, hygiene when you're taking photos.
100%. Great call out, right? Let's move on to the next article. We like to have good news. I don't have a good news article this week. I apologize. But I do have a new threat actor gang that is being seen more and more. And what's interesting about RTM Locker is they're an RTFM Locker. Yes, that's correct. It would definitely be. Read the manual, right? So anybody, there's our acronym for today. RTM stands for Read the Manual Locker. And they're popping out and saying, "Yep, there we go. Got one." We're going to get to 100 pretty quick. But they're popping out and saying, "Hey, we're an affiliate ransomware gang," right? They allow people to come in and do their partnership and provide access to the platform for people. Dom, what do you think about this? This is another one of those things where we're seeing the proliferation of ransomware by people that create something, and then just like Conti, they have affiliates, right? So what are your thoughts on this particular one?
Affiliate marketing is one of the oldest ways to sell stuff, particularly on the internet, right? You get affiliates to go sell your stuff for you. You pay them a couple points. This is the same exact thing, right? We always say ransomware operators are businesses, and that's what this is. And if you have the talent to write the tool, and perhaps not the talent to distribute it at scale, why wouldn't you take this business approach? It makes solid sense. So I think this is going to be the trend, right? Where you just do it as a service and you sell it as a service, particularly with dark marketplaces being as prolific as they are.
Yeah, exactly. And when you think about it, they are also uniquely in this one, have been using over-the-counter tools for things such as remote access, like Quoter did,
Right.
right? And where you're starting to see them use legitimate tools so that they don't, detect. They're not detected by EDR, MDR, XDR type tools in general, and that's a, pretty smart tactic. But I think to your point, the nice thing about nice being in the negative criminal side of this, but the nice thing about being an affiliate is you can take those affiliate payments, the money that you're making, and actually reinvest in the application, right? It's the whole argument of that not having to have tons of employees and actors doing it. We just simply
Right.
take feedback and make a better and better product for you to consume so that you can go and ransom people down the street. In fact, we're going to try to help you not get detected. We'll rotate out the remote access software. We'll do blah, 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 blah. And that's where it comes
Right.
down to, I think, these type of are the most dangerous ones because the barrier to entry is really small. There's nobody to decentralize and take out from an actor perspective. Only the people that create the software that would actually be the root of that challenge. So, yeah, that's a
They're
tough
the
one
most
for
hidden,
sure.
right? They're not the ones communicating with victims. They're not. So there's a lot of layers between whoever's generating the tool and the people actually using the tool. So it gets very difficult to cut the head off
Yeah.
the snake.
Yeah, 100%. Right. So, and I will say the first thing it tries to do, somebody asked me this yesterday, and I'm going to take just a second and tackle it. One of the controls in CIS under 5 in the identity section says, hey, have separate admin accounts. And it was actually Sheldon Phillips. In fact, I'll say, Shell, if you're watching, feel free to jump in and we'll kind of tackle this live for you in a little bit. But, he said, Matt, how do I go back and tell management we need to take away local admin rights? How do I go win that battle for all of my technicians? I think this is one of those evidences here, right? If I have the ability to escalate permission, if I have the ability to escalate, all the things that I can do are much easier to do, right? If I can escalate, I can probably do LLM&R poisoning. I'm not going to know what LLM&R stands for. A local link lookup of some sort. I got to look it up. I'm sorry. I got to do
Think
my
local
acronym here, y'all.
multicast name
Local,
resolution.
yeah, local multicast name resolution. It's a failback protocol for DNS resolution, domain name services resolution. But I got off on a tangent and then I got sidetracked. I apologize. Help me out, Dom. I apologize. I'm
All right.
losing it here.
I'm gonna interrupt though, because Dark Web
Okay.
Monthly would like to know where in the world is Matt Lee, and I was speculating before the show that that's somewhere around like a Motel 6 quality motel, but I'm not sure.
Deaf.
Not sure.
No. This is I'm in the Dallas downtown Dallas area at the Lincoln Center. That was actually where I'm staying in a Hilton. But yeah, I actually presented this morning that to JP Kesey and a few others. But back to Sheldon's point, I think the argument is that you need to take away local admin rights. If I don't have the ability to escalate, a lot of the things that they're doing, if you look at this kill chain, aren't possible, right? And I think that's the point of trying to make this of if you take away local admin rights, and if you're watching the game and you want to know how to play the game better, one of those plays is taking away local admin rights, right, Dom? Like it kills a lot of these
100%.
things. Yeah, and we get into this when we get in with Cam later, and he starts wanting to kind of roll around about things. This is one of those things where if you have an EDR, MDR, XDR, and you give local admin privileges, I'm probably going to get underneath it before you can react to it. Right, that's most of the
Oh,
time. I can
100%.
run a few different
Yeah.
techniques. Yeah, exactly.
It's not that hard to
All
become
right, we got.
system if you're a local
It
admin.
is not.
So
It is not exactly. Let's go to this last one. We have yet another ransomware gang that's starting to show up more and more and more. But the manufacturer MSI has been hit by the money message gang, and they're asking for a payment of $4 million within 5 days, or they will publish 1.5 terabytes of stolen MSI data. That includes framework of MSI's BIOS firmware, as well as other private keys that can be used to sign and or install custom modules. And so when you start thinking about that, them releasing that sucks. It's not great, but them having it in its own right is not great either. And so you're hoping at least that MSI is rotating signing certs and keys. They're doing things to respond to this. But Dom, if you had a map of someone's firmware and you were a threat actor and you had this Wi-Fi firmware map that talks about all the things that are done, what does that do for you as a threat actor with capabilities to build code exploits?
fun, right? Like if you're able to get into the UEFI, which is crap. All right, Matt, you're gonna have to Google this one.
Gosh, I'm gonna get it.
UEFI.
Something extensible interface.
Yeah, something. We have a problem, right? Like you can essentially embed a signed trusted rootkit and wherever you want. And important thing to remember is MSI, while they do manufacture and sell full devices, they're primarily a component manufacturer, right? So a lot of companies that churn out like server boards are using MSI's UEFI and chipset components in their server boards, or even their client compute boards. So this could be a massive one if it's not taken care of, but I would certainly hope that the authorities that are issuing them certs have, one, revoked them, and that, like you said, MSI has generated new key material and signed new certificates to start kind of phasing out the old MSI. I would be more concerned if you have a pre-existing MSI device and you went to update said BIOS, you could have an issue.
Yeah. Unified Extensible Firmware Interface, I believe is what it stood for. Looked that
makes
up.
sense.
I apologize.
Right.
Unified Extensible Firmware Interface, yeah. And it's what replaced regular BIOS, right? Traditional unsigned BIOS activity in the machines. But I think to the point, you see these attacks on hardware manufacturers and data gathering. I don't know that I would put it past those ransomware gangs to also find alternate means of making money. And if I was to steal someone's code signing certs and I'm on the dark web, I'm going to sell those code signing certs regardless of whether they pay me the ransom, right? I'm going to monetize those things. I'm going to monetize the firmware. And I think the challenge is when it comes to the firmware side of things, it's even harder, right? Because they'd have to change the way they've designed it. Like there could be some fundamental flaws in the way it's structured, architected, the way they work, the way the interoperabilities of the modules work. And so if you have an entire map of how that's built, it's very hard to change the entirety of how your code is structured for that firmware.
And you could even break that out further for like broader understanding. Back when Teacup broke into Rockstar and he stole the GTA 6. I love mentioning Teacup. His name is silly.
I wasn't it Teapot. It was Teapot, right? It was
Teapot. That's my bad. Teacup is his kid. But
Teacup's his kid. Yeah.
Anyways, he stole the GTA 6 source code, right? So now there's this broad understanding of how GTA 6 is written, and cheaters can write exploits. It's the same concept scaled up to the root of how your device turns on, like quite literally, right? After positive and negative terminals connect, the UEFI kicks in. That's exactly the part of the process we're compromising.
And we've already seen one malware that does that, right? That compromises the UEFI and gains God-level access, right? Creates drivers inside Windows from that level. So anyways, one of the challenges I think we face, all of us, it's definitely a good time to toss the machine. And one of the things that I think I'd like to talk about, and Robin's going to do a great job here in a second, is what happens and what can go wrong in a self-regulation model, right? And should we self-regulate and things like that? So let's kick over to Robin Harris and see her wise words of wisdom.
I want to talk a little bit about industries and self-regulation. And one of the things that I notice with privacy is that because the technology industry did not self-regulate, that actually opened the door for all this legislation. And I'm not taking anything away from our legislators globally or anything. They're great. However, when they come up with the solution to the problem, it's not going to be based on them understanding your industry, what's possible for you, what's not even practical. Like, you will see legislation that it's a law now, and everybody's trying to figure out, how do we really do that? Because our industry isn't set up to really do that. What would get us out of that is self-regulation. And I love the credit card industry example, PCI. That's self-regulated. They didn't wait for someone else to come and say, hey, you got to do X, Y, and Z to protect people's credit card information and blah, blah, blah. They took it upon themselves. They stopped being competitors for a minute, and they said, let's create the standard, because when you do that, you protect the whole industry, and you cannot be a lone wolf. You just cannot. Like the car industry, it's an industry. You know, the credit card industry, it's an industry. You know, the MSP industry, it's an industry. So there are things that we want to self-regulate on and standards that we want to put in place, and we want to avoid at all costs waiting for lawmakers to slap our hands and tell us what to do. Let's figure this stuff out. We have enough expertise, enough knowledge, enough wisdom to come together and start self-regulating our own industries for the good of everyone. It protects the consumer, it protects the companies. It just makes sense. And that's just my take on it.
Well,
Robin always nails it.
welcome, Cam. All right, Cam, you want to introduce yourself real quick for everybody before we start fighting, or how we want to do this?
Oh, you're setting it up, huh? The ringmaster. Well, for starters, before, just honored to be here. Longtime fan, first time on the show. So thank you, gents. My name is Kameron Goldman, Senior Director of Vendor Strategy here at Pax8 and Development as well. And looking forward to being on. You know, I know you guys have covered MDR in the past. Glad we're able to kind of bring this one back around. I think XDR might get thrown into the mix as well. So it was
right back out.
a lively
Probably,
conversation, and let's keep it going.
Listen, anybody watching, treat this a little bit like an AMA. Ask in the chat. We're monitoring it right now on YouTube, and we'll take this kind of that direction that you want to go. But you know, Cam, you wanted to have this conversation, right, and have it live and dig deeper into what Dom and I kicked down with. What is EDR? What is MDR? What are these things? So help me understand where you feel we needed to add some more content, right, Cam? So let's talk about it that way. What brought you to want to be here today, my friend?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's two dings that we got to throw on the board out of that.
EDR, MDR, XDR. Okay,
three.
fair.
All right, one more.
Three. Yeah, the three. I was counting.
I told you I'm a fan. I know the show. I'm waiting for the
endpoint
auditors
detection
to
and
pop in as
response,
well.
managed detection and response, and then some bullshit made up term response. Yes, exactly. XDR.
Ouch.
I'm sorry. I'm allowed to say that one? I may not be. It's okay.
Okay.
I mean, you say it, but I would challenge and say, where in extended are we missing the boat? And I think that even just saying response, like that's something that needs some digging into, because a lot of people hear EDR, MDR, XDR, and their thought goes to remediation. So remediation is something that does exist out in market, and when you're looking at these vendors and they throw an R at you, it's important to say, all right, thank you. Is that response? Is that remediation? Because even those two have very different meanings, right? So just from the start, are we not extending the detection by throwing that into the mix?
Yeah, I think for me, and Dom, I don't know if you want to take this first. In fact, you know what, Dom, why don't you respond to that first? I'll let you go with
it. We touched on this on our last show about these three acronyms, and the problem is, and actually, I think EDR and MDR went through the same exact phase, and MDR isn't that far beyond it yet, and that it's a marketing term, right? There's no technical definition of an EDR. It doesn't exist. You're not going to find it in any dictionary. It's not going to be in any sort of curricula. It's a marketing term, right? Now, traditionally, I feel like cyber has been defined by the marketing team first, right? And it takes a few years for the product to be able to do what the marketing team says it's able to do, right? And in fact, in the majority of products, the product does not do what the marketing team says it does, right? And XDR is so new that we haven't even defined what extended is. I think if you ask 100 partners, 40 of them are going to come up with extended, and the rest are going to think X as a variable, and then the rest of them are just aren't going to know, right? So I think it's still in the made up term phase, and the XDR products at best are sort of super glued a few different products together, and now it's an XDR.
Yep. And I'll touch on this a little further, mainly on the first part of the response piece, right? When you talk about EDR, XDR, MDR, any of those, it's all about the response. But I bet if you as an MSP that are watching this went and looked at your console for your EDR, Sentinel-1, whatever it may be, I don't care. I bet you have incidents that have been closed by the EDR that you do nothing with, that they're remediated. It stopped it. I'm good. It's fine. But at some point, that second one you got from that one customer and the third one you got from that one customer was me breaking in and through that EDR agent. And I think that's the point. You need the response. It's not just this initial device gets responded by this EDR, but how does that go deeper? How does that get looked at? And that's where MDR comes in, right? I think MDR is just a retelling of, you don't have the skills and capabilities in your organization to do this effectively. That's what MDR in my mind is a statement of.
100%.
Right? Somebody that's good at this
Or the time.
can go in or the time. Great. It's usually experience or expertise, but you're also right? What if it's 24/7? Do you have enough to cover the time? Do you have enough to cover every single moment of that and enough to cover the number of quantity of those requests? And I know I made my cheesy video about you sleeping at night, and I'm sorry for that, but the point is, that's the reality of it. If you're an MSP and you have an EDR product and you're not managing it, I believe you're failing. Now, you can manage it internally. You can hire the staff. You can have a 24/7 staff that has resiliency. If Dom calls in sick or an auditor is making him go somewhere and do something, you have resiliency. You have enough people. But if you think about that cost, Cam, how many MSPs today would be able to take 4 or 5 FTEs that it would take to do that and be resilient and have enough coverage and have enough bandwidth for that? How many could even hire that? How many could spend 1.5 or so million after burden on the number of humans it would take to manage a real
in the
MDR type
most
solution in
competitive
that way?
vertical for employees in the job marketplace?
Right.
too. At least
And
one.
Yeah,
right.
100%.
So as soon as you have that thing staffed, how long before someone's coming through with a higher offer? So,
Yep.
why not take,
I was-
what's being afforded to you?
I was at a conference a couple weeks ago, and it's a vendor building an MDR solution. So I won't say who it was, but and when they were talking about it, they were saying, "Hey, the guy that came in says, I in my former MDR and SOC land would bring someone in for 60, train them up. They were worth 140 in about 3 months, and they would leave in 4 months. And it was a revolving door. It was something where I had to make a partnership with the college so that the college would send me 12 new, MS students that just came out with a cybersecurity degree and are ready to move forward with being a SOC analyst. And so they had to get a program just to deal with that matriculation of how many people they had to keep running through the SOC in that way. So I think, EDR and MDR are fairly well to understand, at least as a basic piece. I really think even calling something EDR, what, you don't think AV responded? Did we not have a response from AV? What about next generation AV? What about, and I think the challenge is, instead of teaching people and making people smart on what a product is, what it does, what its feature set is, tying it to something like safeguards, we go with new names for stuff. This is cool.
Right.
This is E.
Right.
We're now
Right.
an EDR.
This
We
is
solved
E.
it. It's an E. We're good. Yeah.
So is
From A to
ZDR
E.
next? Is that what we're saying? Like,
ZDR is next, and that would be Xennial detection and response.
Zen-
We actually can
Zen-
find
Xennial
Xennials with that
detection.
tool.
yes.
Yeah.
And yet there still is a market, drift towards these things. And I think that
True
to
story.
some extent you see it with, with Apple, you see it with some of the great names out there.
Yep.
Marketing can start to command the technology, right? Like, how many
Yeah.
of the weirdest words are we seeing getting added to the dictionary, on an annual basis? So, things that
Yep.
you hear coming out of TikTok or, whatever it is, like, oh, wow, that's Webster says that's a real word now, right? And then soon
Yeah,
enough, it's
yeah.
like, all right, technology says that EDR is a real deal, technology play now. So I think there's multiple angles kind of pulling the game up.
Yeah.
I did not mean to.
Thanks
do
for
that,
using the
but I'm
game.
proud of it.
Appreciate you on
Yeah.
that. That's great.
Nailed it.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. I would add to this.
And
so
with
I think you're
MDR,
right. The tech.
I think there's an opportunity with MDR to just keep, pushing beyond the tech, right? Or letting tech kind of happen in a different way where, MSPs get really buried into security. They get buried into those AVs or EDRs. Why manage something that much when an MDR vendor is willing to provide that to you at a really nominal cost in the grand scheme of things to what it would cost you to manage it today or to build your own SOC? Those are the costs that we were talking about. But what about the opportunity cost to dig in on a customer's, needs? I've seen some of the things that partners are doing with Power Apps. I've seen some of the stuff that doesn't have to do with security at all. But how do you have time to do that if you're, neck deep in an EDR trying to clear out, all of these tickets? And I know today that there's a lot of noise, and some of those tickets you're just not even going to touch because it's noise, and
Well,
my inbox
let's
is a
dig into
mess,
that, because
right?
I
But
think
what
you no,
can
I think you hit the nail on the head with this one, Cam, in the point that yes, these tools are being adopted, and it's not because of their title, it's not because of that, it's because they're doing fundamentally different things, right? And
Right.
AV looked at signatures, processing of how those things worked, what was good or bad, heuristics maybe to some extent. EDR is grabbing telemetry. EDR is grabbing things that seemingly would not be related, that are part of the event structure that are happening, and then correlating and tying those together and saying, here's the data around this. Why? It's because there's more nuance to it.
Well,
When you
that's kind of
start
my
thinking about
point,
what
right?
EDR
Though,
does,
there's
yeah,
a
go ahead.
massive technology growth between traditional AV, like, I don't know, let's pick on AVG. 'Cause everyone loves picking on AVG. And what AVG did was
Sure.
waited for the first 10 people to get punched in the face really hard. And then they built a new face mask to help the 11th guy, right? But those first
Yep.
10 people were just screwed. Like at the end of the day,
Oh yeah. That's how my eyes
until
got
the
like
vendors
this.
knew that hash. Right. Exactly. Right. But now we have a new face mask for that particular situation. And EDR really stretched into saying, what does it look like when someone's about to punch someone in the face, right? Do they tense up,
Yes.
right? They start flexing muscles and get ready for that attack. Now we start to understand that. And I think, honestly, EDR was probably one of the better evolutions, because I think the behavioral thing started with the first generation heuristics concept, and has now moved into this quote unquote machine learning model, but it's really just behavior analytics, right? Where we talk about machine learning in a whole other episode, right? But I think in general, if we look at the transition to behavior, that sort of happened almost commensurate with the growth of the term EDR, and then MDR came out.
Yep.
More than it is, it's a fantastic and really important service, but it's an EDR, and the humans typically from said code producing entity of your EDR managing what that EDR is picking up. It's a fantastic service. So I don't think the jump from EDR to MDR is massive from a product standpoint. I think it's massive from a SecOps standpoint and being able to operate.
What
And I think
what you
XDR,
will
XDR
find-
will catch up. I think we will have unified
Agreed.
products that are touching the network and the endpoint and the cloud, and all the other components.
I'm really glad to hear you say that, Dom, because I'm pretty
just
sure
don't
that's
think
not.
Yeah,
there
we're
yet.
not all
the last
negative.
Yeah.
Well, let's go
There
back
were-
and
there
look
were
at the
some
tape,
words.
Cam. Let's
Rob.
let's look
Rob,
at the
do we
let's
have
look at
that?
the tape. Let's just see what he
Throw
do we
that
have.
up.
Can we pull this up, Rob? I know you're
You're trying real hard to pull my chain on this. I can feel it. I'll just say it. I think XDR is snake oil. I think the whole term is a joke. And I think the whole term is a joke is because some marketing team came out and said, hey, EDR is getting worn out.
All right, back on my train of
Teapot
thought.
too much.
So-
He's getting back at us.
It is Teapot coming after you. But let's get back to this. So the point is, we look at things from an infrastructural perspective. We look at it as computers, speeds and feeds, nerdy bits, those things. At the end of the day, when an XDR succeeds, Cam, in my opinion, it bridges that gap to exactly what you said. It starts to translate. Dom is on computer A. Computer A has been probably compromised. Computer A then means Dom has also probably been compromised. And when you start thinking about that, that's the transition that needs to happen. You need to be able to take that to cloud and say, hey, where are all the DOMs? Let's find the DOMs and deal with the DOMs stuff. And let's lock down. Let's do more. And you're also starting to see XDR. And I asked this question on the stage when I was talking to the gentleman about the SOC as a service they're building. I said, where does an XDR differ from a SIEM? Where is the divergence between a security intelligence and event manager, or SIEM, and an XDR? And it really came down in his definition of the SIEM holds the data forever. We put some patterns on it. It does stuff. And then we can go back and look at it. Where a lot of XDRs actually go, we're going to look at the patterns. And then if not, we're going to discard this stuff. It's no longer valuable to us. We didn't find anything in it.
Well,
So I think that would be
SIEMs
one of my
tend not to
key
swing
differences.
a hammer.
Right,
Products
you're
that
getting
do
more
swing a hammer,
tools.
but
on
very
the
few.
response
SOAR
side.
does,
Yeah,
but SIEM
yeah.
doesn't, right? Yeah.
Right.
And I think that's the other side. The other side of this security orchestration and automation, right? Is that kind of thing. So to me, Cam, that's where an XDR really crosses the border. And I'm seeing some people working on some very, very viable XDR products that kill the user's access, read over and extend into what other things were being pulled from these other cloud stuff. Look for actual evidence or lack of evidence of compromise in the cloud as it extends past that CAM machine that I just saw an alert on. And you start getting into. That's what I think XDR becomes. That's the extension that I would be looking for. The challenge is you've got varying degrees of XDR being something as simple as our XDR looks at other machines around you. Great. I'm at Starbucks. good for you, right? And you get into some of these things where I just feel like they haven't taken it anywhere creative. They haven't gone into something that was more meaningful. They haven't layered it together to make better decisions. They haven't tied, they just kind of, to Dom's point, bolted in their network product and said, huzzah, right? And that's the gap I think that's missing, is you don't have that true understanding of the object of the user, the understanding of data and where it's at and how that response needs to flow. But you're seeing more of it. You're seeing more playbooks be built where
For sure there's an evolution to come, and you know, you're going to see the vendors continue to push this forward. I would say, you know, you see, you know, some really clever partners are getting, you know, valuable use out of the stuff today even, right? Like if you know what you're getting, right, and you're not overselling or overpromising to your customers, you're still able to grab some of that information and say, hey, you know, my XDR product is telling me Dom's in Mexico. Dom brought the auditors to Mexico and he's having a grand old time, right? And no one told his boss, right? So now you get to call up and say, hey, you know, so that's, again, where the MSP gets to go in and say, hey, did you know this? This is happening. Like, this isn't one that, like, we want to shut down because it's 6 logins from Russia or North Korea's, you know, trying to log in. Like, this is something that's real, but now we're providing that business value to that customer and saying, oh, you know what? We did not give him permission to do that. Or, yeah, sure. Thanks for letting us know. Thanks for keeping eyes on that. We know Dom's down in Mexico having a great time, you know, sipping Mai Tais and
always
chatting about, you know, cybersecurity.
Like, Mai Tais out of a teacup. Mai Tais out of a teacup.
It is out of a teacup. It's a
with an umbrella.
Mai Tai. Yeah.
Teacup with an umbrella. Like, we're really putting things together now.
But you did hit on another point too. An effective MDR, if we want to go back to MDR, you kind of have 2 schools of thought in MDR. One school of thought is we're going to respond the same way, same SLAs, same MTTD, which is mean time to detection, and MTTR, which is mean time to response or restoration, depending on how you look at it. But when you look at it, a good MDR, in my mind, of the 2 variants, one variance being the actual, we just do it all the same way. Everybody consumes it the same way. Everybody has the same outcome. We're going to isolate a machine. This is the next thing we're going to do. This is the next thing we're going to do. And then the other side of the camp is what I don't think most MSPs have been prepared for, and I think that's some of the gap in our industry, is the ones that want to sit down and say, Cam, let's look at your 52 clients that we're rolling this out to. For client 1, let's develop a playbook. Who's Dom? Is he important? Do we need to manage him? What should we do if Dom has a compromise? Are you okay with Dom being isolated as soon? Let's go to the next one. What times of the day do you think that we should call you? And when should we escalate our next call to the next person? And when should we take action on this machine and do something restorative without your involvement? And those are called run books or playbooks or workbooks, right? I've heard them called in various different degrees. But in my mind, in a very effective MDR establishes very, very good granularity in their playbooks, and an effective MSP using an effective MDR has the wherewithal and the partnership to actually do some of these things and build these workbooks. The other side of it is there's a giant gap in getting the MSPs to actually take action, right? In fact, when I'm talking to MDR vendors, that's some of their biggest frustration is we find it, we don't have the permission to isolate the machine, or maybe we do, but then they don't do anything. They don't wipe and reload it after you have something like an Emotet, right? Emotet banking financial Trojan. You can't wipe it. You have to wipe and reload the machine. There is no getting rid of it. And so you get into these things where, you know, you need to have an effective partnership if you are going to go down an MDR path. And so I wanted to dig into that just a little bit. Cam, when you're seeing this with your vendors, are you seeing a growing maturity in some of that MDR aspect? I mean, I know we just brought on Malwarebytes. I love their backstory and what they're building, right? They're trying to make it down to the masses and the more, you know, affordable full set MDR extensibility and XDR extensibility in their mind. But are you seeing the maturation of that, you know, what is an MDR grow even still, Cam, at this point?
Yeah, absolutely. Down to, you know, site level, group level, you know, these vendors are, I mean, they're taking the feedback, right? Like, it only comes from, you know, folks like you, folks like the MSPs that are trying this out and saying, hey, you know, this is a start, right? Like, I can use this with this customer, like, this works. But, you know, for someone else where I've got different levels of, you know, of risk tolerance based on the different, you know, personas at the company, I'm not in a place to be able to deploy MDR on this customer yet, right? So I think just out of a need to close business, out of a need to, you know, to evolve and continue to win the mind share of our MSPs, those vendors are they're investing in that, right? That's the model. You're seeing big bets being placed on MDR. Like, you're not going to stand up a SOC and hire all those people and you probably have a better count of what that number is, but what's the minimum, right? It's 12 people or something like that to run 8-hour shifts. Like, that's a huge investment. So if you make that investment
It's
and then you
assuming
just
you're
stop
working
sourcing
24
the
hours a
feedback,
day too.
right?
7 days a
Yeah,
week.
That was
you're not
exactly the
gonna
numbers
get-
actually my friend
Yeah.
said.
Yeah, you'll never
Yeah,
be
100%.
successful, and then that's a huge sunk investment. So I think that it comes twofold, right? It's the marketing push. You're grabbing that interest, you're grabbing mind share in that way, but then the proof is in the pudding, right? And no one's keeping products that don't stick or don't kind of solve that solution that was promised.
Well,
by
and
marketing.
the
So,
challenge with that, though, and where that has fallen apart in the past, and it's not many, and actually they tend not to be on our line card, which is fantastic. But there are some people out there that will throw out terms a la cyber immune or 100%.
Don't start.
Or I know.
okay.
And I'm not talking that it's that extreme, but when you throw out a term like XDR and that we extend before the product is truly doing that, it's less about potential damage to that vendor's reputation, because to be honest, I could care less about that, right? I know you care, but in general, what happens is we have practitioners that get encouraged, particularly practitioners on the junior side. They get encouraged by that, and then they get real surprised when they get punched in the face, right? So
Yep.
it leads to this reliance on a product that is not going to do what it's advertised, and that's what we've really got to shore up, is say, hey, we're working on this thing. We're calling it XDR. X means extended. By the way, someone needs to come out and say that, because until like the last episode we talked about, I swore it was just X like in algebra. But anyways,
I thought so too.
and here's what we're working towards. Here's what it's going to do. We want you to come along with us. That would be a much more realistic angle to bring a product like that to market.
And you're seeing that in marketing, right, Dom? Like, look at Caroline Goals, the way that she's approaching this as educate, and inform, right? And so you are seeing that shift, in my opinion, of people stopping the histrionic marketing, because to Cam's point, it's not working as well anymore. You're starting to see educated professionals start saying, well, that's not tell me what it really does. Help me understand. And now they'll be forced to help you understand and to do those points. Now, before I get on this next tirade real quick, and then we'll jump into some other conversation, I can say this because I have already done this. In 2017, I signed the single largest MSP, $45,000 a month, managed detection and response with Carver. Right. So this was a long time ago. So I'm not saying this to be in that marketing position or sales position of this. I genuinely believe it enough that I wrote my check. In fact, it was funny when Tony Miller, my VP of operations, was ready to write that check. He signed that contract. He called and he goes, Matt, are you sure SentinelOne's the right answer? And I said, why? What's going on? You've already asked me this. I've already given you the technical brief. We already know where we are. And you could tell he just didn't want to sign a $3.2 million contract for the first time in his life. It's huge. And so I say this with that level of certainty. If you are buying an EDR product, you should have MDR. Period.
Yes.
I do not think it is efficacious to think that you can manage this yourself. Period. Now, XDR.
Rob, can we clip that?
I think that's
Please
going
clip
to come
that.
into a conversation.
Clip that.
That's my hot take, is it, Cam?
Noted.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think you should. I
one.
genuinely believe that. I would say that.
I love that. I love hearing that.
I agree.
Yeah, I think the XDR part is a different conversation. And I also think even in the MDR, if you aren't going to build those playbooks, if you aren't going to work with a vendor to make that workbook, then I think you at the very least should give that MDR vendor carte blanche ability to make a decision to isolate a machine. Right. And Dom, I don't know if you agree or disagree with that. You're shaking your head. Yes. So I'm assuming you agree. But
I don't know about carte. I don't give anyone carte blanche, but yes, a lot of
fair.
autonomy.
We're semi carte blanche at this point.
I am going to trust what they do and probably slap them on the wrist if they do it wrong. But chances are, even if they overreact, they're probably overreacting on a factual reason with good foundation. It's the same concept as punishing your employees for failing the phishing test, right? You don't do that. So yes, I would want them to be able to take
I'll give you a
action,
perfect
and I will deal
example.
with the
Matt, is
customer
this
if
a
they get
CIS
pissed.
control, or is this something that, I think kind of falls into more of the EDR?
That's a great question. No, and that's it. Here's why. This is why I say you have to buy MDR if you're not going to staff up a full-blown ability to respond to this with real understood intelligence about it. It is that when you think about it, The reason I had this problem, I'm mapping, as everybody knows, I'm mapping the CIS controls and safeguards to our products. And when I was doing Sentinel-1, I ran into a challenge because I actually couldn't find another real control or safeguard that it added other than what was already there. And I started asking myself, why? What's wrong here? The only thing it adds is actually 8.4, which is review logs, because now you actually have somebody reviewing the EDR data as well in that space. But that's it. And the reason I got to this conclusion is they assume you already know how to do it. They assume you're already managing it. They assume you already have a staff doing this. So I think MDR is really just the market realizing there's not enough people to do it, that they must centralize and have these force multipliers that can apply that. The other thing you got me going on with MDR and even in XDR and its conversation is when you start looking at MDR, if I build it myself, how many people know how much it costs to buy a threat feed? Dom, do you know how much it costs to get a threat feed in the commercial world right now? A non-free one?
$30,000 a month on the low side.
Yes, it's at least 100,000 a year. So it's really more to 10, 11 in that space. But there's none of them that'll talk to you for less than the 100,000. So when you start thinking about that, it's not just the cost of the humans. It's I have to get good threat feeds. Why? Well, the better my threat intelligence, the better I make a decision on an action. And then I'll get into the real world scenario of this. Let's say you're Dom and you're the smartest guy in the world. And so you're running your own EDR. And I'm Matt, and I've hired Numbskull 1 and 2 to run my EDR as an MDR solution.
That's me.
Right? Thanks, Numbskull. You're the man. But here's the deal. Think about 3CX. Look at 3CX a couple weeks ago, right? The first thing their support staff said in their support forums, if you were Dom going to look at the support to see what the heck's going on, was, don't worry, that's Sentinel-1 just with a false positive. Please exclude said false positive. You're saying that Dom is telling everyone, I'm capable of making the decision against abject advice from a vendor that says, no, this is going to a Korean IP address. It has C-squared type traffic. It's 100% malicious. And Sentinel-1 stopped it. But people were dropping their coverage and allowing the threat actors to win just because they don't have the expertise to actually fight that battle. And I think those are some of the common pieces where you see MDR vendors build that. Why? They got a lot at stake. That's their jam. That's all they do is make decisions on these things. And they're going to do it at scale better than I think I could do it myself, if that makes sense. So
it's like going to fill out that Scantron for your CIS controls with, your number 2 pencil, but you get halfway through that bubble. You throw that thing through the scan and it's not going to come through. You're not going to say that you checked the EDR box if you're not managing it correctly.
Yeah.
And I just got to say, Matt,
that's why there's
when it comes to those CIS controls, I think you're like James Brown's band when it comes to CIS controls. I can say backup and disaster recovery services, and bam, James Brown's band. Just 11.
Gotcha.
Boom.
Yeah, 11.
You see?
Done.
He just says, ooh, point to the band. They know the CIS control.
I do. I'm a student of CIS. I spend a lot of time applying CIS controls and how they function and what they mean and teaching
Inventory
it. So I would
devices.
say learned a lot. Yeah, 1.1.
See?
And what is a device? What is an asset? Let's really get into that. IoT, mobile devices, PCs,
what is
servers, right? Virtual, logical. Like if you think about it, like SpaceX names their capsule, it has an AD object. It actually is an Active Directory. They have the capsule has an asset tag to it, right? So
I heard the toilet does too,
right?
They're very, very AD centric.
The toilet does. Old Flusher-matic 7, yeah.
Those are policy
I think
and all
the point
that.
is, I think for now, MSPs would be better served focusing on the CIS controls or NIST CSF than trying to run a SOC and trying to run an MDR solution and trying to do those things. And it's also more defensive.
And trying to be a
you start
business
getting into
advisor
this,
and run a help desk and advise on software solutions and, help deal with remote work and everything else that falls into an MSP scope. At a few dollars an endpoint or however it's priced, some of it's per user. I can have a whole team.
Caleb's
that
got a
handles
great
that
question.
at scale.
Let's tackle Caleb's question. I'll ask this out loud, Dom, and you go first. Do you guys think we'll see next generation, parenthetical, iterations or quoted, iterations of these tools as time goes, like NG-EDR, NG-MDR, NG-XDR? Doesn't sound as pretty as NGFWs, but he's making a great callback, right? So, Dom, what are your thoughts? Do you think we'll see NG tacked in front of it? If you say it, it might happen. Now Gartner's listening.
Oh God, yeah. Now we've brought it in. Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head though on accident. Like Gartner could do it, and then suddenly everyone has an NG something. Gartner, I'm not just picking on them,
Yeah, yeah.
Forrester, any of them.
Yeah,
it
God
could-
bless
it could
them.
become a segment.
They mean
NG
well.
is another one of those things, though. Like, one, NG exists in perpetuity, right? Like, next by
Yeah,
default does
yeah.
not end, right? So
I want the
absolutely
NNG
hate
version
the NG
now.
thing. Yeah, exactly. Like, where does that stop? I do
Yeah,
feel like I don't
exactly.
see NGAV anymore, so I feel like maybe we've escaped that. I hope. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. What
Well,
about you, Cam?
you don't have
What
a
do you
choice,
think? You
right?
think we're
Like,
gonna see?
it depends on where the business goes, right? Where someone's business goes, then there's technology to support that, and then you need the technology to protect it. So it's just a never-ending, motion.
Yeah, and I don't think so. I don't know. This is actually my whole beef. And Caroline, I love you and I appreciate what you're doing and changing these things, right? But I think this is my whole beef is that we often are just defining a class just to be able to have new people pay us to put it in the top right box, right? Next generation firewall. What does that even mean? It's a stateful inspection firewall. What are we talking about? What added
Right,
there? What did we
right.
do?
Right.
Right? Like I just don't like the histrionics of marketing, and I think they play to the dumber audience. And I don't mean that to be
Maybe you
diminutive
start
or
naming them
pejorative,
after
but
actual generation. Like we'll have the millennial firewalls and then the zillennial
sure.
firewalls.
Zennial firewalls, yeah.
Yes,
And then the ones that like show up for work, and then you've got
That's next. I don't
boomers.
even
We
know
could
what's
have a
coming
boomer
next.
firewall that's just
A boomer.
angry all the time and not really
No,
knowing
that's
how
the
to use
Linksys,
technology or
man. That's the
something.
WRT54.
Oh, right, the WRT54 boomer. I remember that one. It was
Wait,
so
Dom, are your kids zillennials? Millennial? No, they're not millennials,
I don't.
obviously.
I'm a millennial, so I don't know what.
they're auditors.
So you don't know your
They're
kids'
auditors.
generation. They're auditors. Got it. I'll just
No.
leave it at that.
Auditors, yeah.
Yeah, they haven't defined
TikTokers.
themselves yet. But back to your point, Cam, I don't think business changes tools other than the technology landscape is changing. And I often
Right.
find NG or any of those terms really just to be a way to say, we didn't get it right the first time. Here's the next gen. Here's something else. We're good. This is the bee's knees. This is the top, right? I just feel like that kind of stuff isn't very defensible. But
bee's
when you see the
knees.
maturity of the consumer rise, right, you're going to start talking about, instead of just, oh, here's the drug name, it's going to have to be the things it does, what it's actually for, right? You might go Paxlovid.
It's what
right? But
makes
you're gonna
discovery
then-
so
yeah.
important, right? Like,
Yes.
traditional AV, if we want to like go back and say that, definition based, and that by and large covered what we were looking to cover, right? Those were the threats that existed. As threats matured, we needed to move to the next thing. If you want to call it next generation, I'm not the marketing guy. I do like to buy in on some of the marketing terms. It helps.
It's okay. I still
It
love
helps
you.
define. It helps, but the discovery is important. Don't just accept next generation. Like I like to say it, but I wouldn't fault someone for pressing me on it and say, hey, okay, tell me what's different. Tell me why this is next.
Would you
Just to
apply the
let
same-
you know, guys, the next generation is Generation Alpha. No cap. I googled it.
Oh,
Well, I
really?
didn't Google it. Someone
Okay.
else did and then told me. Yeah.
No cap.
terrifying.
You heard it.
Terrifying.
Alpha Gen detection next.
I would ask you this then, Cam. Would you apply the same logic to XDR, where just accepting the word XDR is not okay, and we need to know what
Absolutely.
does it do from that perspective?
That's what I'm saying. XDR,
Yeah.
it's not, cool. You're extended. Tell me where you're extended to,
Huzzah.
right? Like,
yeah.
How far do you
Exactly.
extend? If you're extending just to my Active Directory, cool. I know that. If you're extending beyond that, to much more, SaaS tools, if you're, hooking into Salesforce and you're, doing some protection or at least, identification and, making it easier for me to respond, right? Again, I don't need to see like full remediation today, but if it's easier,
Sure.
if the tools are there to respond and say, hey, we need to take action because we're seeing, anomalies, like press. Don't just accept,
Yeah.
the marketing term, but, know the marketing term is always going to be there.
Well, and there's two factors in XDR in my mind, right? There is the ability to respond to some platform, which is important. I agree that's the extensibility of that. But there's also the ability to ingest from that platform, right? And that's what I'm seeing so many things not be really there, where you're now, instead of saying, oh, cool, I'm going to be able to tell that Dom got compromised. Let me block him out. Great, that should happen. That's DR. But if
Right.
I don't D it before I R it, I'm not better. I have to detect. I have to be able to get data. When you look at NIST and it says identify first know thyself, control 1121. After that, it gets into then afterwards protect, which everybody does. We get that. Everybody puts the P out. We get it. But now it's how do I detect? How do I respond and recover? And if you think about that, That's 3/5. Sorry about putting the P out there, buddy. I saw you laughing back there, Dom. But the 3/5 of this equation are detection, response, and recovery. And I think that's where we need to understand that the real EDR, XDR aspect of this, and especially XDR, should be getting data from other services as well and ingesting that and going, that's Matt. This is Matt. That's Matt's machine. Matt just got a phishing email. It was alerted to by Checkpoint. Now I have this. We know what's going on now. He was
And
compromised.
it's very much human based, right? Like I don't think we're at a point where technology can piece together an entire kill chain. Right? It can get pretty damn close nowadays. We've made a ton of progress. I don't want to take away from that.
Look at Defender. Defender's nuts right now.
Yeah, exactly. But you still need the human to analyze, understand the kill chain, and figure out what actions need. Perhaps untaken. Say XDR generation alpha, knocks the user offline, isolates every device associated with them. That's probably a good way to panic. Then you still need the human. Sometimes panic is good, but you still need that human to come in and then make fine-tune adjustments to that reaction so that business can continue and you can start to remediate that threat and exterminate it, right? So I think XDR will always be a managed product.
That's the crowdsourcing. That's the open ecosystem. I think that, I've heard it from you guys before. I'm not saying anything new here, but that has to be the direction, right? We have to be able to crowdsource and share this data and be able to work together, across all these platforms to really piece together what is happening out in the threat landscape. So you're almost cutting yourself off.
And remember,
if you want to lock things down.
Right. Well, and remember, you also, when you create that, that's just the next generation attacker. That's an NGA. I don't know if you saw that. That's the next generation adversary. Is they're just going to continue to abuse the actual, that's not a real acronym. I made it up, but we're using it. So it's cool.
Doesn't matter. It happened.
Okay. Fair. It did. Yeah. And
it's not real yet.
This play out. Yeah. I think though, we're starting to see growth, and I think, great having you on and to have this conversation of, XDR is snake oil only in the sense that it's just a marketing term. And just like everything else, you have to do your due care. You have to do your due diligence. You have to do the investigation and learn. And if you can't, it's time to partner. That is why you'd bring in an MDR. That is why you'd bring in as a SOCAS or a SOC as a service. That is why you'd bring in. And I think what you're actually seeing is a bit of a merger between SOC as a service and how we actually really scale something in XDR, right? Like I think you'll start seeing XDR be a more affordable opportunity for people than necessarily a full-blown SOC as a service from that perspective, because it's all about automating the normal. You said it well, right? I know about Salesforce. Guess what? Salesforce be Salesforce, yo. Right? And Microsoft is going to be Microsoft. And so when you get at it, there are very normalized APIs that you can do predictable behaviors with. I can say, Dom was compromised. Let's go look at the data in Salesforce. Let's go check things. Oh, we find we need to isolate the user. Let's do the isolations of these two users, right? In that one vein. So I do believe that because of the normalization of all the stuff that's out there, XDR is a real viable option for people that are trying to solve the security challenge of orchestration for those very normalized customers. And I think that's where you'll see it the fastest. That's what I see with Malwarebytes. That's what I see with some of the other players that are out there building
when
MDRs.
It stops being snake oil, right? When that materializes, right? I think that's when it stops being snake oil.
My work here is done. I don't know what to say. You guys are saying it better than me. Sounds like we won Dom
You've talked us off a ledge. Is that your point? All right. Well, Cam, it's always awesome having you on here, brother. If you got any closing words, you get to talk to vendors and partners alike. Like, close us out and let's move on to Dom closing us out. Cam, what you got?
Yeah. Man, put me on the spot here, but I'm really energized. We had multiple vendors in the house recently at Pax8. We had our entire sales group in between sales leadership and management, the entire Americas group. So 300 people plus, and Malwarebytes there. Really highlighting a lot of that new technology. We had a vendor who I don't want to step on the press release yet, so stay tuned. You're going to hear from this other vendor that was there as well, and I think everyone's going to be really excited about that. But you just see the buy-in, you see the incentive from Pax8 to drive these things forward, and the work that we're doing with partners to educate and drive vendors forward and make sure that they're solutioning for what those needs are for MSPs for their customers. And I think our vendors are doing a great job at taking what they're hearing and innovating on that, and taking what they're not hearing and really innovating on that. And maybe that's where XDR came from, is some of the unknowns. And then, we source
How do
the
we
feedback
extend this
from there.
thing?
How do we extend this thing? And then you do it, and it's a little
Exactly.
bit of snake oil, and you say, you're almost there,
Yeah.
but start pulling in these feeds, and you're there, right? So it's shared responsibility to raise the
Ooh,
tide.
Don't get me
across
started
the
on
group.
shared responsibility matrix, bro. All right. Yep. Let's wrap this thing up, Dom. Cam,
Thank
you're
you, gents.
amazing.
I
I love
appreciate
you
it.
so much.
Yeah,
Thank you for
thanks
being
for
here.
joining us,
See y'all
Cam.
later.
Really appreciate you. That's this week's episode of the game, sponsored by Next Gen. Anything you want to throw behind the term Next Gen. Don't forget to join us next Friday for the game. We're going to be talking to Brad Gross about shared responsibility.
I'm excited
and how
about
you
that.
as an MSP can bring shared responsibility into your operations to customer. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, all that jazz. Catch both Academy Live and Technically Unraveled in addition to the game right here on Pax8 Live, and we'll see you next week.
Go win the game, y'all.